Testing, 1, 2, 3, test. Yes, we have video again. Welcome to the Sensei Mui Show. And are you pumped?
Pumped.
Pumped. Are you pumped?
Pumped.
Yeah. What a load of crap.
So if you're pumped, you're at a frequency of 2 then, right?
It depends on what you're pumped about. If you're pumped happy, then you get a higher frequency. If you're pumped unhappy, you get a lower frequency. Anyway, we're talking about the Anusaya because, what's her name over there? Requested it. And Anusaya means essentially to go to bed with what you're sleeping with. And the reason what you're laying down with. And there's a reason for that being used. Because the opposite of Anusaya is nirvana. For about 300-400 years, we misunderstood where the word nirvana comes from. It would appear, and conventional wisdom says that nirvana means to blow out or to extinguish, to cool off. And it can. That's one of the possible etymologies, but there's another possible etymology for it, and that means to uncover. And that makes a heck of a lot more sense in terms of the Anusaya, the 7 latent hindrances. Now, when the Buddha was talking about this, he talked about hindrances.
So the 7 hindrances?
7 latent
Tendencies. Are hindrances? Or?
They are the same as the hindrances.
Oh, okay.
Because when the Buddha was originally teaching about this, he did not enumerate the hindrances. That came later. Mainly in the Abhidhamma literature and commentaries. But what he actually did say was, me. Monks, there are 7 obsessions. Which 7? The obsession of sensual passion, sense pleasure. The obsession of resistance, which we call aversion. The obsession of views. The obsession of uncertainty, or doubt. The obsession of conceit. The obsession of passion for becoming. The obsession of ignorance. This is found in the Anguttara Nikaya 711. In 712, he goes on to say, monks, with the abandoning and destruction of the 7 obsessions, the holy life is fulfilled. Which 7? The obsession of sensual passion, the obsession of resistance, the obsession of views, the obsession of uncertainty, the obsession of conceit, the obsession of passion for becoming, the obsession of ignorance. With abandoning and destruction of these 7 obsessions, the holy life is fulfilled. You become an arhat, enlightened. Total Buddhahood is guaranteed. You get to live the rest of your life happily.
What is resistance again?
Resistance is aversion.
Oh, aversion.
Aversion to something.
Mm-hmm.
So, in contemporary Buddhism, we say that because these are latent tendencies, they are not karmically active. They are neutral. And that's pretty cool. That sounds like it's harmless. I know that I'm greedy. Okay, that's all right. I can have that underlying tendency to be greedy. That's all right. In one school of Buddhism, Yogacara, a fellow named Vasambandhu came around. His history is really interesting on account of it's impossible for him to have lived the way we claim he lived. But and the length of time he would have had to have lived to do all this. But he had the idea that these were like seeds, these 7 latent tendencies. They're seeds in our storehouse consciousness, and when the right stimulation comes along, then they blossom up into the hindrances. That's not what the Buddha said. He made no distinction between the latent tendencies and the hindrances. It's an obsession. It may be latent now, but it's still affecting your life because it's there. It's like an undiagnosed cancer. It's doing damage, even though you're not aware of it. About 2,500 years later, a fellow named Carl Gustav Jung comes around and he explains this concept of a shadow self. He's talking about the Anusaya. He's just doing it in Western terms.
He's talking about the obsessions?
And yeah, the Anusaya, the obsessions.
Latent tendencies.
What we sleep with, yeah.
Okay.
And
so
it's
that's
interesting.
The shadow.
That's the shadow.
Uh-huh.
That's the shadow self. It's always active, but we're not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the Buddha referred to those who are aware of them as awakened. Those who are not awake are totally unaware that they're going on. This is one of the reasons why the mindfulness practice is so important. To watch your mind, just like I did at the camp last week. Had to watch my mind constantly so I could enjoy what was going on. If I wouldn't have watched my mind, I would have had a totally miserable time. Instead, watching my mind, I found, wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know I felt that way. That was fascinating. I didn't need TV for 3 days. Besides, I had Charlie Chan downloaded on my computer, so it was okay. All of our actions, mental, verbal, and bodily, are not always conscious actions. Some neuroscientists will say that up to 70 to 80% of the time, we are running on autopilot. We're totally unconscious of what we're doing. This is why the term walking dead is so appropriate for the average person. They don't know what they are doing. It's like, when you first learn how to drive, you have to pay attention to everything that's going on. After you've driven for a long time, maybe not even that long, you can sort of drive on autopilot. You don't even have to pay attention to where you're going. 1 minute you're at home, the next minute you're at work, wow, how did I get here? And in the meantime, there are 7 children that'll never be able to go home again because you just ran over them. Unconsciously, of course. But we are prone to go on autopilot and not be aware of what's happening. So when we do feel things like a high anxiety or intense anxiety, we didn't notice it coming on. We didn't notice the symptoms. We didn't notice the stimulation which causes it. We just suddenly were anxious. It's like a guy who goes to prison. When I used to do prison work, I used to ask people, how did you get here? And they would say, well, everything was going fine, and one day I robbed a bank. Okay, what led you to rob the bank? I don't know, man. I was just there with a gun in my hand. Okay, obviously something got you there. Everything was going fine, and then I started using drugs for no reason at all. Now, there's a reason why you're using drugs. Get real here. So, it's like today's class is all about this is the way it is. This is not going to be any of that cool fairy dust Buddhism that we get on YouTube. But it's a very, I say that and I got a YouTube channel. That's smart. Okay. But I do not choose to offend anyone, but if anyone chooses to be offended, feel free. It's on you. The hindrances, the 7 latent tendencies, become hindrances when we notice them. When we're not noticing them, we call them latent tendencies, even though they're highly active. So these latent tendencies are karmically potent because they're affecting us constantly. They affect our choices. They affect what we do. They cause us to run on autopilot. They cause us to become anxious. They cause us to become angry. They cause us to dislike other people, to constantly compare ourselves to other people. And we do it unconsciously. And then at the same time, we're going to tell the whole world we have free will. We have no free will. That's a myth. Get over it. It doesn't happen. You're not going to have free will if you're constantly driven around by your unconscious and unaware of what's going on in your life. You just gave away your free will. In my case, whenever I see a Kit Kat bar, I have fond memories. Why? Because when I was 5 years old, I fell in love with Kit Kat bars. So if I go out and spend $100 on Kit Kat bars, it's not me who's doing it, it's that 5-year-old who's doing it. But I'm the one taking the rap for it because now I can't pay my phone bill. I do not have free will because I have set myself up. Whatever decision I'm going to make in the next 10 minutes, I have already made those decisions years ago. If I am not mindful of my mental activity, then I have no free will. And this is the problem of Western culture that I can see, and probably one of the reasons why I'm really skeptical that Buddhism is going to, really take a foothold in the United States, as it's supposed to be, Buddhism as it's supposed to be, because we are not an introspective culture. We don't have that kind of tradition. And Buddhism really requires us to be introspective, to be reflective, to be contemplative a lot. Almost 24/7 if you're going to make any progress. And this is why meditation is so fantastically important, is because that's the only time when we're still and quiet enough to actually look at our mind. Otherwise, we're just running on autopilot. Oh, look at the pretty flower. Oh, isn't that a cute little squirrel? And we're running around not noticing what's happening in the mind. I saw this beautiful, cute little newborn bunny rabbit today. We're calling it a mini roo. And when they get older, they become a regular roo, because then there will be a new generation of mini roos. And so we have micro roos, mini roos, middle roos, and old roos. And they're all rabbits at different ages. So I look at the little bunny rabbit. The first thing I do is I'm missing Easter. I don't even practice Christianity, and I'm missing Easter. So what's going on in my mind? Tiny bunny rabbit, chocolate bunnies. So I get a craving for chocolate because I saw a bunny rabbit. So then I go down here to Berry Pike, buy a cup of coffee, and a chocolate biscotti. And I don't know why I'm craving it. Why do I do not know why I'm craving it? I do not know why I'm craving it because I'm not paying attention to my mind. It was a manifestation of the obsession to become a child again, to get that happiness, that joy that I used to feel on Easter, when I still believed in the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, and a just and free America. And I thought English people were sane. And I thought that Sweden was paradise. And I thought that Bruce Lee really did kick ass, before I realized the truth about all these things. It's longing for me that seeing that rabbit fostered a feeling of wanting to get back to innocence. And I did not once question the possibility of getting back to that kind of innocence at 70. You can do that. You can be just as innocent at 70 as you were at 7. There's a reason why youth, extreme youth like childhood, and old age are admired with equal value in most cultures. Not in the Western culture so much, but then we're kind of screwed up anyway. But in most cultures, the extremely aged are considered to be wise because they have all this experience. Children are considered to be wise because they have no experience. They haven't been jaded yet. So you have intuitive knowledge and learned knowledge. And they're highly respected. Who's not respected? Everybody in the middle. Unless they do something to be respected for. interesting facet about our world.
So, boy, how did you figure out it had to do with the obsession to become rather than the sensual pleasure, obsession?
By
I have
watching the associations arising in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, because I really don't care for chocolate that much.
Uh-huh.
But the idea that chocolate is equal to pleasure and pleasure is equal to happiness arose in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that is strictly a cultural phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
No sane person would think that way. That pleasure and happiness are the same thing. You have to be crazy to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Because happiness is not about stimulation. Pleasure is about stimulation. And to equate stimulation with happiness would be foolish. So that's what I was doing, was looking for that bit of happiness, which in my mind I associated with the chocolate Easter Bunny. And I could see that happening. If I wouldn't have seen that happening, I would have gotten 2 biscottis. They give me a discount because they think I'm somebody with a robe. Okay. So in early Buddhism, yeah, these things were very, very potent because they're latent and hidden, sort of under the covers, sort of thing, does not mean they're not active. They're like bed bugs. Very, very active in the dark.
So the bunny was the catalyst and it brings it out.
Yeah. And that was one of the stimulants. There were many others: the greenness of the grass, the warmth of the day, the karma, which arose at that time upon seeing these things, the time of year, all of that played a part. See, we tend to think of everything as being linear, and nothing is linear. It's like driving a car. We think if we're driving down the highway and we're going to do a steady 70 miles an hour, we put our foot in a certain place and then we never have to move our foot again. We'll just go at 70 miles an hour. But if you attach electronic devices up to your foot, you see that your foot is doing this all the time. It's constantly moving, but we're not aware of it. The same thing happens in the mind. We think we're focused on one thing, but our mind is constantly shifting and moving. It really is a monkey mind. It won't stand still. So karmic fruit is born because of unwise attention. We're not focused on what's happening in the mind. We're focusing upon what it is that the ego is desiring at any given time. That's what we're doing. That's what latent tendencies do. What time is it? Okay. So what is the... Whoa. Oh, how clever. I printed on both sides of the sheet. Okay. So later on in Buddhism, the idea that there are 5 hindrances arose, and these 5 hindrances are sensory desire. Okay, and basically this is sensory desire is latching onto thoughts or feelings based on pleasures of the 5 senses, 5 physical senses. When we have sensual desire, we are latching on to the mistake that sensual pleasure equals happiness, as I just said. Ill will is the next one that's on there. Sloth and torpor, laziness and boredom. Restlessness and worry and doubt. These are the 5 hindrances that they extrapolated out of this list. Well, and they're called kileshas in the scripture.
Was this after Buddha, that the idea of the 5 hindrances, did that come after Buddha?
It's implied in the Buddha, but what he did not enumerate 5 hindrances per se. That pops up mainly in the Abhidhamma literature, which is attributed to the Buddha, but it's not in the suttas, the discourses. So it's assumed that, yeah, he probably taught these, but he did not teach them in the way that we have them today. Okay. The word kalisha or hindrances is also translated as affliction, defilement, destructive emotions, toxic emotions, disturbing emotions, negative emotions, mental poisons. In contemporary Mahayana and Theravada Buddhist traditions, the three kalishas of ignorance, attachment, and aversion are identified as the root of all of our problems. So in the wheel of life, you have the rooster, the pig, and the snake, and they represent this. In early Buddhist text of the Pali Canon, there is no specific enumeration of these three kalishas. And here the Buddha is saying something again. To quote the Buddha, monks, any desire, passion with regard to the eye is a defilement of the mind. Any desire, passion with regard to the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the intellect is a defilement of mind. When, with regard to these six spaces, the defilements of awareness are abandoned, then the mind is inclined to renunciation. The mind fostered by renunciation feels malleable for the direct knowing of those qualities worth realizing. Basically, what it is saying is that if we can get around to abandoning our dependency upon our addiction to sense pleasure, then we can renounce our attachment to them. So does this mean we stop enjoying things? Not only no, but hell no. We still continue to enjoy. We're just not addicted to them any longer. We're not chasing after them. I mean, remember high school? Chasing after people all the time? Remember that stack of National Geographics under the bed where you pulled it out and you go, native women with breasts, look at that. This is before Playboy. That childish addiction to the sense pleasure that the eye gave. And what is the eye actually seeing?
Reflected light.
Reflected light waves. Not even light. But we get all caught up in reflected light waves. My wife was watching Don Juan DeMarco with Johnny Depp. And she was going, oh, Johnny Depp's so beautiful, look at him, I can see why women fall in love with him. And while she's talking, she's falling in love with. What's she falling in love with? Pixels being irradiated on an electronic screen. She's not even looking at Johnny Depp. She's looking at an image of Johnny Depp. And he's faking that cool Spanish accent that he's in the movie. I'm waiting for Faye Dunaway to get on screen so I can fall in love with that. But no, we got to watch Johnny Depp. So we're watching this show, and I can see in her face and on her expression how deeply enamored she is of this electronic image putting out waves of a certain frequency that come into her mind. They go back to the brain, and whatever part it gets rearranged, and it comes to her mind as this image of this Adonis-like guy with a phony Spanish accent. Then come all the other things. Oh, I wish I were 18 again, or in her case 16. That's when she was legal in Sweden. I wish I was 16 again and beautiful, and then I could have people like Johnny Depp all around me. Oh my God, I'm getting so old and I'm getting pudgy and I'm so... you can just see it all coming up because of reflected light waves. Not watching what's going on in the mind, but watching what happened in the past and projecting it onto the present and then making a comparison between then and now. I mean, this is all fantasy stuff. 99.5% of everything we experience is imaginary. We're only picking up 0.5% of all the data. We got to fill in the blanks somehow. So we fill it in with our imagination. And normally we fill it in with one of these 10 hindrances. Let's start out with the first one. Greed, aka lobha in Pali, raga in Sanskrit. Raga in Sanskrit is the word which is most often translated as greed. And it comes into our English language as rage. Greed has something to do with rage. I mean, our ancestors figured that out. We can't, but they did. So much for primitive man. The other interesting thing about the word raga is that it was the name of the chief witch of the Lithuanian people back in the day. If you wanted to talk about the evil witch, you talked about the raga. Sanskrit and Lithuanian are very, very closely related. So where did they get the idea to call the witch raga? Because it meant greed. It literally means color or hue. And the reason that in Sanskrit Buddhists began using the word raga, meaning color or hue, is because greed blemishes one's character. So now you have a mental blemish, a personal impurity. Okay, it includes any form of desire, including sensual desire and sensual passion, as well as attachments to, excitement over, and pleasure derived from objects of the senses, and some people render that as craving. And again, we're talking about like even normal sense desires and sense passions, even the normal ones, because they lead to the obsession. If I give in to this one, I'm going to give in to more later. If I can't discipline myself here and now, I'm not going to discipline myself then and there. It has to be done now. Dan's going out on a date and he's going, wait a minute, I don't want to hear this now. Maybe after the date I want to hear this, but not now. Okay, so raga is one of the three poisons. To extinguish all raga, greed, lust, desire, and attachment, is necessary to achieve nirvana. That greed has to be uncovered. The blanket has to be removed. You have to be able to see it. Where am I greedy? Okay. I'm greedy. I want this. Is it wrong for me to have it? Ultimately, in the scheme, the big picture, probably not. In the little picture, though, it increases discipline. For when it does seem overwhelming, you have some sort of arsenal of weapons to deal with. Why do we deal with this one first? Because it's the most pervasive. We can see it everywhere. Why do we choose the colors we wear? I choose the colors I wear today because this is the colors of a Hongaku monk. Also, oddly enough, other ordinations I got. But would I be wearing this if I did not want to? No. Why are you wearing what you're wearing? Or you're wearing what you're wearing? Or you're wearing what you're wearing? Because there is a sense desire for those colors. There is a sense desire for that comfort. there is a sense desire to look a certain way, a sense desire to feel a certain way. So these things come up, they're pervasive, we don't even notice them. Why do I have this mala today rather than some other mala? Because today this is the most pleasing to me sensually. Not because it has any special significance. Outside of that, it's really, really cool and has coral and turquoise in it. And it's magical. It helps me talk to squirrels. In the Abhidhamma, craving is described as the attachment to the three realms of existence. Its function consists of engendering suffering. The Abhidharma Samyucaya says its function consists of engendering suffering. That's what greed does. Raga arises from the identification of self as a being separate from everything else. I would not be greedy if I did not think I was separate from the rest of the universe. If I realized I were part of the universe, then I wouldn't have to worry about it, because then I know I had it anyway. Whatever it is I'm greedy for in the realm of sense pleasure, I already got it. Where am I experiencing things anyway? I'm not experiencing anything out there. I'm experiencing it all in my mind because it doesn't really exist out there. It's like the color red does not literally exist in nature. It exists because my mind is putting together light waves in a certain way and interpreting them as red. And red has certain associations. And those associations go all the way back to my infancy. And it gets really, really complicated if I try to put all the associations I have with red into words and try to figure it out. And the misperception or misunderstanding that the self is somehow separate from everything else is called avidya, or avijja in Pali. Avidya, our word video comes from it. And avidya means not seeing. We translate that as ignorance. The fact that we're ignoring reality as it is. Number 2 on the Big Ten, hate, dosa. It is the exact opposite of lust and raga, greed. It means I'm averse to something. Well, they exist together. If you're attached to something, you're averse to something else. If you're averse to something, it's because you're attached to something else. If you're pushing, you're also pulling at the same time. We can't help that. That's just the way we are. Number 3, delusion. Moha. It's also referred to as delusion, confusion, and dullness, and its roots come from the roots of the word moha come from moga, which literally means empty, unreal, vain, useless, and foolish. We call that ignorance. It is the opposite of prajna, insight and wisdom. Number 4, we are speeding. What did I do with my lunch? We are speeding through this because of time. Number 4, conceit. In Sanskrit, the word for conceit is mana, M-A-N-A, mana. Mana is where we get the word man, woman, human, mana. We have named ourselves after conceit. Conceit, translated usually as pride, arrogance, is defined as an inflated mind that makes whatever is suitable, such as wealth or learning, to be the foundation of pride. Man the thinker, Homo sapien. We take something and we take pride in it. An accident of birth. I'm an American. I'm the greatest in the world. Yep. I'm going to move to Texas and vote conservative. Yep. We're constantly assigning value to things which have no value. And then we take pride in possessing things we don't possess. Guy gets $100,000 a year salary at a job, just gets this job, walks into it. That's my job. I have that job. No, you don't. Your boss has that job, and he can take it away from you as soon as he wants to. You don't have $100,000 because you got to pay a year's salary, because you got to pay to Medicare and taxes. You do not own that new car that you bought. The bank owns that new car that you bought. You do not own the property you live in. The bank owns the property you live in, unless you paid off your mortgage. And then guess who owns the property you live in? Anybody ever hear of eminent domain? The state owns the property you live in. You're kind of sort of leasing it, actually. We take pride in wealth. We used to take pride in the color of our skin. Now some people do, some people don't. We used to take pride in our religion. We used to take pride in all kinds of weird things that were really not us. But do we take pride in ourselves? That's the big question. And is pride in ourselves really necessary? That's another good question. We might talk about that someday. But are you've got to look at yourself someday and, what am I proud of that I have done all by myself? You find that there's very, very little. It's an upholding of ourselves, making ourselves important while we compare ourselves with someone else, no matter in what way, and that is conceit, a false or anticipatory arrogance or arrogance of showing off. Then there is something called modest conceit. That's a puffed up mind that feels that I'm just a little inferior compared to someone else. Modest arrogance means I'm going to elevate somebody else over me. Well, you can't really do that. So what we do instead is we make ourselves a little lower than everybody else. That person is better than I am. That person is more important than I am. Then there's distorted arrogance or perverted arrogance, which is the puffed up mind that it's referred to as a deviant aspect that I have fallen to is a good quality that I have attained. It means that I'm associating myself with a circumstance and I feel good about that. Like, I am a good hunter. I am a good warrior. I have the capability to kill terrorists. I can be a terrorist. I can lie and become a politician, or a minister, or a lawyer, or a retail salesman. Associating with some sort of perversion. Killing is a perversion. It is an oxymoron to say I am a good hunter. You might be a skilled hunter. Wrong views contrasted with common sense understanding. In this case, a view is not just an abstract collection of ideas. In this case, a view is an emotionally charged interpretation of an experience that intensely shapes and affects thoughts, sensations, and actions. You see this most often in political philosophy and in religion, where somebody has not experienced something, but they know it's true, and they will argue with you to death if you don't agree with them. Views are produced by and turned into mental conditioning. Our mental conditioning causes us to hold these views. Not because they're true, not because we've experienced them, directly experienced them. No, we had to take some time to think about them and then decide what they meant. This is not direct experience. This is thinking about it and interpreting it and trying to justify the feelings you have about the experience. Then our mental conditioning causes us to make that interpretation. Then that interpretation reinforces the mental conditioning. It's a vicious catch-22 cycle. Back in the medieval period, you saw it in the Inquisition. The way the Inquisition was set up, it was okay to torture and kill people. The more people you tortured and killed, the easier the torture and killing became, until torturing and killing became your norm. I know people that'll only vote Democrat or vote Republican because that's their viewpoint. And the more often they vote that way, the more likely they are to continue voting that way, because it becomes a mental habit. Not because the candidate is better or worse than the other candidate, but because that's just what they do. It's confirmation bias. I will only see evidence that supports my hypothesis. This is the sort of thing that we're talking about here in this view, this addiction to views. The English translation, here you are. You have views which are volitional formation because you desire to have those views. And then you have non-volitional ideas, views that arise from the subconscious, because you've been conditioned to believe that way. So, some of the views you have, you inherited. Some of the views you have, you developed on purpose. The negative effects of attachment are speculative or fixed views, dogmatic opinions, and these dogmatic opinions can even be about correct views. One can have a perfectly correct view of life, but they become obsessive and they become hindrances if you have not directly experienced them. Oh, it's getting dark in here.
Yeah.
It's supposed to rain.
Good for them. And in the old literature, this is called the wrangling of views, or the tangle of tangles. Doubt or indecision includes doubt about realities, doubt about name and forms, doubt about cause and effect, doubt about the Four Noble Truths, doubt about dependent origination. These are the different kinds of doubts the literature is talking about.
Is dependent origination that we're all one, or?
No, dependent origination is sort of like the cause and effect thing. It means that because everything exists because of causes and conditions, puts them together. Dependent origination also carries with it the connotation of the 12 links of interdependence, where it starts out with ignorance and it works its way through the wheel of life to the manifestation of an idea or an action. And that includes that there's a sequence of events which occurs before a thought arises. That includes that. Then torpor, number 7. Torpor, generally translated as sloth, dullness of the mind characterized by a lack of driving power. It comes in conjunction usually with mida, torpor. Wait a minute, that is torpor. What do I put here? Oh, in Theravada it's defined as a morbid state that is characterized by unwieldiness, a lack of energy, or an opposition to wholesome activity. Its function is to dispel energy. Ever see people get tired because they just can't take anymore? It's because they're giving up. It's not because they're overwhelmed. A lot of people just, I'm too tired to fight. I give up. Do what you will. It has nothing to do with rightness or wrongness, skill or unskill. It's just something we do. We just give up because we're tired. We get lazy. We don't want to do it anymore. We don't. Sometimes in practice it is, I don't want to practice tonight. I'm too tired. Could you turn on the light? It's like I'm looking at the screen and all I'm seeing is the fire of the candle. Could you turn on the light? Yeah. Do you know that 44% of all Americans are waiting for the second coming?
Really?
I heard that on The Nation the other day. 44% are waiting for the world to end. No wonder they can't get involved with anything. They think the world's going to end in their lifetime. And 52%, I think they said, actually believe, 52% of Americans actually believe that the world's only 6,000 years old. Seriously. It's what kind of a country I gotta get out of here. But this is the kind of country we live in. And we wonder why this is a problem. The reason I thought about that, again, watching the mind, I said, could you turn on the light? The lights were on. I instinctively thought, let there be light. Oh, that comes from the Bible. Did you know people really believe in the Bible? Okay.
And then you start thinking that you can't put up with the country that you live in.
Exactly. And that's all part of the experiences.
And then I started thinking about the rise of guns.
Yeah. I can't live in a country where the major religion is the First Apostolic Church of the Holy Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you just,
what's the point? I don't want a gun. I don't have to buy a gun. Therefore, the Second Amendment's cool.
So you just kind of do these things. It doesn't mean that you're not, practicing right, or you're a bad person, or
No.
it's just like kind of natural.
It's kind of natural. And again, it goes back to conceit. If I say I'm a good person or if I say I'm a bad person, then I'm being conceited. Because how do I come to that kind of a judgment? I have to create a fictional character in my mind that I use as a standard. It is wrong to kill under any circumstances. What nonsense is that? If you're coming at me with a baseball bat and I happen to have a 9mm Glock, I may be tempted to use it. If a poisonous snake is coming to bite you and I happen to have an axe, I might be tempted to use it on the snake. Don't worry. So sometimes killing has a function. Sometimes acts which we have categorized as being immoral behavior sometimes have a moral purpose, like saving life, like stealing from the rich to give to the poor, instead of what we do here, steal from the poor to give to the rich. I can't think of any justification for the sexual immorality part. I really can't. I wish I could, then I could use it at home. Okay. Sometimes it's beneficial to lie. Sometimes intoxication is a wonderful thing. We use it in meditation all the time. Not the taking of drugs or alcohol. Mental intoxication. It's a wonderful tool. Number 8, restlessness. The mental factor that is characterized by disquiet, like water whipped in the wind. Great. And it is a mental factor that causes our mind to fly off from an object and recollect something else. Restlessness is the inability to calmly abide in a given situation, because our mind becomes somehow incapable of being focused on the here and now. We can't focus on what's at hand, so our mind turns to something else and focuses on that when it's not even around. The mind is agitated because it is drawn away compulsively to some object of desire. Number 9, shamelessness. The lack of shame, the lack of consciousness, and lack of conscience, as opposed to conscious. Defined as the absence of disgust at a physical or a verbal misconduct. In the Mahayana tradition, it's defined as not restraining from wrongdoing due to one's own consciousness or conscience. Yeah. It is not restraining oneself from taking one's perversions as the norm. Boy. We were talking about the 5 precepts one day. I forget exactly where it was at. We were talking about how can you live the 5 precepts in our culture today. If you could only tell the truth, you could never become president. You have to break the first precept to become a politician or an attorney, sometimes a minister. Retail person, yeah, you gotta lie to be in retail. You've gotta lie to become president of the United States. You've gotta lie to become prime minister of Great Britain. You've got to lie to be successful in politics. Stealing. You've got to steal to get ahead. You've got to steal from your customers because you want an income. So you have to charge, depending on how rich you want to be, you have to charge these incredible markups in order to get ahead. Sexual immorality. Look at the television set. Everybody's cheating on somebody else. You've got child models in porno magazines now. Child pornography has never been so widespread as it is today. Roofies, the pickup community, all incredibly immoral behavior, and yet they're accepted norms. Okay, we covered lying, harmlessness, stealing, okay, intoxication. The drug culture is huge. I have people on one hand, on the internet, in books, in magazines, screaming about the unspeakable beauty of reality. In one breath, in the next breath, telling you to use the hallucinogen to get there. Why do you think they call it an hallucinogenic? Because it generates hallucinations. You're already living in a hallucination. Why do you want to augment that? If beauty were so unspeakably beautiful, reality were so unspeakably beautiful, why are you avoiding it by taking a drug? And then we buy into the bullshit we tell ourselves. We buy into the bullshit other people tell us. That's an intoxication too. So if you want to live a moral life, you cannot do it if you're going to live according to the norms of our culture. You have to be abnormal to live a disciplined moral lifestyle.
Countercultural.
Very countercultural and counterintuitive to our culture. There is a difference between doing something that is normal and doing something that is natural. It's natural to be faithful in your relationships, but it's not normal. It's natural to want to be comfortable, but that's not normal. Now I want to be rich and pampered. It's natural to be happy, but that's not normal. We want to be pleasured instead. So we live in a culture which is technically shameless. And the only thing we can do is plow through life on our own and be happy. We can be happy. Let the rest of them be miserable. We can be happy. We can be grumpy and happy at the same time, just like Ajahn Brahm says. If I'm happy about being grumpy, then I'm not grumpy anymore. Cool. And the last one, number 10, recklessness. This is a good one. Lack of propriety, disregard, the absence of dread on account of misconduct, engaging non-virtue without inhibition on account of others. Okay, if I am shameless, I might not drive 80 miles an hour in a school zone because I regard the punishment for driving 80 miles an hour in a school zone as a deterrent. We have this bullshit belief in our country that the death penalty actually deters crime. People will believe anything. The death penalty has never deterred crime. As a matter of fact, the death penalty was abandoned one time, declared unconstitutional for a few years. They brought it back. Guess what happened? The murder rate went up. There might be a fear about doing life in prison over doing a few years in prison and dying. Okay. I don't think many people commit murder thinking, well, if I do this, they're going to send me to the electric chair. No, you commit a murder because you're angry, you're hateful. Unless you're a trained assassin, then you'll probably get away with it anyway. But I don't think anybody thinks about it, the consequences of their actions. But when we drive, and thank God we have traffic laws in Evanston because we have some of the world's worst drivers in this city, people do not drive terribly recklessly on account of there are laws and fines. A reckless person doesn't care about the laws and fines. They'll drive the way they want, which is what a lot of people in Evanston do.
Yesterday I was crossing the street and there was a woman turning left and it looked like she was aiming for me.
Uh-huh.
I got angry and I swung my purse at her car after she turned.
Yeah, I used to carry this shoulder bag with a brick in it, or rocks. I think it was a couple of big rocks. So when I walked over to the Quaker Church, place of peace, right? Buddhist person of peace, I used to carry it on my shoulder bag and cross the street called Crane Street because people were driving. I mean, they didn't care. They just didn't even look.
Yeah.
They just turned the corner right there. And I used to have that, waiting for somebody to hit me so I could smash the window. Thank goodness I'm past that now. But I've been almost run over a couple of times. One person, twice last month. I don't think it was the same person. I think it was two different cars. Came this close to hitting me, running over my feet while I was crossing the street, and I had the right of way.
Oh yeah.
This is Illinois. I always have the right of way.
Yeah.
I'm a pedestrian.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So and people are yelling at me, you can't walk across the street here. It's a crosswalk.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you mean I can't walk here?
Yeah.
Have you read your driver's manual?
Oh yeah.
Pedestrian always has the right of way.
Yeah.
And people argue with me that no. Why are they arguing with me like that? Probably, possibly, maybe because they're in a 2,000-pound vehicle and I'm in 6-ounce sandals.
Yeah.
They're driving at 40 miles an hour. I'm walking at about 3 miles an hour. Their hitting me is going to have more damage to me than I will have to their car. They feel protected in that car. They're bigger and better. That's conceit. They're in a hurry. That's greed. They want to get somewhere. They have an aversion to being slowed down. They have a desire to become someone other than who they are. That is someone of power over somebody else. And they're ignorant. Just right there, you can pick all of them. But the interesting thing is, once you start examining this and contemplating and looking inside at yourself, you discover something really, really fascinating. If one hindrance exists, they're all there. If one of the Anusaya, the 7 latent tendencies, is starting to manifest, it's because they're all manifesting. And they're all coming out of the same place. They're all coming out of ignorance, ignoring what's really going on. And we're not seeing what's going on because we have evolved in such a way, we have been encultured in such a way, we have been educated in such a way to pay attention to the fantasy and not the reality. This is why most of us can't be happy much of the time. We can derive pleasure, but we can't derive happiness. And this is one of the problems that we have in our society, and we see it with the last elections. In this country, we had, and in Europe, you get the same thing. You've got a bunch of pissed off people voting their conscience. They're voting their pissed offness without thinking things through. If the Brits would have thought things through, do you think they would actually have voted yes for Brexit? Not only no, but hell no. They weren't thinking. Look at the bill they got now.
Yeah.
Look at I think 1.3 million Brits living abroad, wondering, what country do I live in now? Do I have to go back to that cold, damp climate, or can I stay here in Italy?
No, you're no longer part of the union.
Yeah. And then what do you do about Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
Northern Ireland can't be part of EU anymore. Southern Ireland, the regular Ireland, is part of EU. Does that mean people from Northern Ireland can no longer cross the border into Southern Ireland?
No, maybe we'll finally have unification. Come on, it's about time. One
Oh, is
country.
Ireland part of the UK, or how does that?
Northern Ireland's part of UK.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Scotland
I
is
actually didn't know that.
Scotland is voting to get out of the UK
United Ireland, come on, let's go.
So why,
because Scotland wants to be part of
so
EU.
all the UK is
Oh
part
yeah,
of Brexit.
United Celtic lands, let's go.
Only part of UK is Brexit then? Because you said part of Southern.
No, all of UK is.
Why is
There are
Ireland,
two Irelands, Northern Ireland and Ireland, the Republic of Ireland.
So why is Ireland?
Ireland's a divided nation.
Oh, okay. Also, Northern Ireland's part of the UK.
Yeah, yeah,
Ireland is its own. Okay.
yeah. Ireland, the Republic of Ireland is green, Catholic, and Northern Ireland is Protestant and orange. Colorblind.
Protestant and orange,
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like Donald Trump.
yeah, a lot like Donald Trump. Yes, yes. The Reese's peanut butter man. Yeah. So those are the issues. Any questions?
Well, there's a ton of them,
Yeah.
but we'll have to leave it
There
till
was
the
a lot-
next,
lot
next
there.
time.
It's a heavy teaching.
Very heavy.
And I went over it very superficially. We could actually spend an entire workshop on each one of the
Yeah.
hindrances
Yeah.
very easily.
Mhm.
And we may start doing that and then pick out the hindrances you hate the most.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay.
There's a quote up at the Jung Institute in Evanston, and it said something about about man looking at himself. He hasn't, that this is very important to look within and to do something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And Danny had said to me, "Oh, Mui wouldn't like that," and I said, "I think he would." It's very
Wait, what does it
Buddhist.
say? What does it say?
Something about that you have to examine your consciousness. You have to look, into yourself, and so I think and they do talk about not ignoring your shadow, and that psychotherapy and all this, where you're kind of looking at yourself when you get psychotherapy. You're uncovering things that you had that were formerly unconscious, and then they're becoming conscious. Like you say that. So you're talking, the obsessions are unconscious.
Yeah.
And so to look at them it's like a form of therapy, so if you're doing therapy where you're examining your motivations and you're looking at your shadow, is that a good thing to do as a Buddhist?
It depends on how you're doing the therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that in Zen, I don't know what the actual number is, but it seems like almost everybody who teaches Zen is somehow a Jungian therapist.
Uh-huh.
And that has some value to it, and then it also has some problems, especially when you keep your students coming back constantly for 20 years to keep them treated while you're doing your Jungian therapy, and then you turn around and teach them Zen, and there's a contradiction there, because Jungian therapy really does believe in a self, and Buddhism does not believe in a autonomous, self-existing self. So what is it that you're treating as a Jungian psychotherapist and so forth? It's like it'd be like a Buddhist going to a self-esteem class. I mean, there's something weird about esteem the self, really? I thought that's what I was trying to take care of, was that sort of issue. A lot of Buddhists believe that there is no self at all, and other Buddhists believe there are two manifestations of the self. One is the ego and one is the other power, or big self and little self. Well, the Buddha himself left that open. He never said flatly there is no self at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he also did not say there is a self. And let's talk about it. He left that question open because no matter what he would say, people would argue about it. So that's up for each individual to determine whether there is a self or not a self. I'm of the school, I suspect that self that I am experiencing at any given moment is not my true self.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting back to the question, is it good for a Buddhist to take psychotherapy? And that totally depends upon the person, the Buddhist. It totally depends upon them. It depends upon the therapist and what the issues are. If the issues are of a spiritual nature, then it's probably not a good idea. If the issues are of a social nature, then probably a good idea.
Because a lot of us are afraid to look at our shadow self, you know. Or is it-
Then if you're going to a therapist to have somebody help you examine your shadow self, again, I would think it depends upon the individual, but I'm of the opinion, and this is just an opinion, and opinions don't mean anything because everybody's got them. They're not valuable. You cannot buy a coffee at Starbucks with one. So don't, take it as gospel. But I don't think that's very healthy.
If you're afraid to look at your shadow self, or if you're...
Right. If you're afraid to look at your shadow self, or if you're avoiding your shadow self because of fear, because the last thing the Buddha said was make unto yourself an island. And if you look at the Dhammapada, there's several references there. Make yourself a refuge. Who else can your refuge be? You have to do the work. Other people can't do the work for you. Somebody can guide you into it, but unless they know and have experienced this sort of work, then they're going to lead you down where they want to go, because they have views, they have a certain understanding of how things are. So that's where they're going to take you.
And you get entrapped in that.
Yeah. Then you've got another hindrance to work with. Now you have more problems. So it's best that you do it on your own in the company of a Dharma teacher, of whether it's a Buddhist, Zen, yoga, whatever, doesn't matter, that they can guide you by asking you non-leading questions, first of all, and allow you to do the exploration without guiding you any place. So, because you're the one that has to do that. You have to cut through the layers. Other people are not going to be able to do that because they're cutting through their own layers. They have their own issues to work with. And my former teacher in Zen was a Jungian psychologist, a PsyD of some kind. And she was into Jung. And she was a Zen teacher. And the two just conflicted so badly in practice, it was terrible. Westerners, people that are Western trained in Buddhism, thought she was brilliant. People that were classically trained in Buddhism thought she was a wreck because she conflated the two things constantly. And so her teachings lacked credibility. And she had episodes of not being in the best of mental health because she was working through her own issues.
Yeah.
And so her mental health suffered, and then she's trying to make a business out of helping other people through their mental health issues. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, if I have cancer and my doctor has cancer, that's probably not a big issue. That's no reason not to go see the doctor. If the teachings are true, but the person giving the teaching is morally decrepit in some way, that's not going to be an issue either. Because it's not the teacher that's important, the character of the teacher. That doesn't really matter. It's the character of the teaching that matters. So if the teaching is true, then that's okay. But if the teacher is giving you false teachings, I mean blatantly false teachings, then you probably shouldn't be seeing that person for other things as well. So that's really a complex question, and it really is a situational one. There's just a lot of warning flags go up when somebody says that, or says something like that. You know, should I go to psychotherapy? I don't know how fucked up are you?
Well,
It's past 5. Just
might be looking more for spiritual direction, like there are people that are spiritual directors.
Yeah.
And they help you to face your...
That's who you should be seeing, as a spiritual director. Or I don't want to say spiritual guide, that sounds awfully new agey.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should see somebody that's really has a background and a history of doing spiritual counseling from the particular point of view that you're inquiring into. And that's not to denigrate psychologists. Psychologists are great human beings. They're really skilled, they're talented. Hell, 25% of the population is going to see them, so there must be something good about them. I just personally have misgivings when it comes to a Dharma issue. I think you should see somebody in the Dharma about that.
Yeah.
And they're generally cheaper.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to end the questions there.